today we have Kim, who's coming back to us, and you may remember her from episode 22, where she shared about losing her husband and everything that she went through. But we wanted to bring her back on because she has been working on something pretty amazing over the years, and that's called the Widow Squad. And we really wanted to dig into there because we didn't even touch on it during your first episode. So welcome back. Excited to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be back talking to you guys.
So tell us a little bit, I guess, the high level of what the Widow Squad is, and then maybe what pushed you to kind of pursue this path.
Yeah, the Widow Squad is a group of 3 widows, myself and 2 other widows, who got together to provide resources and support for all the widowed women out there in the world. And we obviously are widows ourselves. So we've been through all the ups and downs and ins and outs of widowhood. And it'll be 10 years for me in February, and around that same time for my partners. And we just felt like there was something missing from our community. And that was just an online membership was what we have as a membership. There are grief groups that you can go to in your local communities, which is fine. But this was specifically for widows because all of us had been to grief groups before that were grief of everybody, not a spouse. And when your spouse dies, it's a different kind of grief. So we thought, what can we do to help these widows and bring them into a space that was safe for them and where they felt heard and understood? And so we thought, why don't we just do a virtual online community? Yeah. So that's what we did. Each of us had a business serving widows before we got together. So I had started a website called Widow 411 back in the day, about 5 or 6 years ago. And one of my other partners had a widowed gift box that you could purchase for widowed people. And then the other one had a podcast of her own. And so we were all serving widows in some way. And we just met online and we had a lot in common. And we just thought, what could we do together? Like, how could we combine our superpowers and really make this something special? So that's what we did. So actually this month, it's been a year that we've had the Widow Squad. So this was our 1 year anniversary this month in October.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So that's what we decided to do. Just find, somehow to bring widows together for support and resources and community and all the things that they need in a safe space. And this is not a Facebook group. It's not on Facebook. It's on a platform called Mighty Networks. So it's a little bit more secure, a little bit more, I don't know, sometimes people aren't as comfortable on Facebook. Besides the fact that Facebook could change things. And the next thing you know, your group has changed. So we have it outside of Facebook. But anyway, that's what we wanted to do. Just be that support and that resource for widows. That's why we started
That's amazing. So you did the Widows 411. You said you started that like 5 or 6 years ago?
Yes. So I started that as a website. I wrote blog posts and provided resources for widows there too. And I did that for probably 5 years. And there's a learning curve, with all the online technology, right? So it took me a while to learn how to do the website and write the blog posts and do all that stuff. But yeah, so I did that and I have lots of resources. I don't update Widow 411 anymore, but it's still out there because a lot of people find it through social media and Pinterest and all those places. So it's still available, lots of resources out there, but I just kind of shifted to the Widow Squad because I wanted to pursue this with with my partners and see where we could go with it and make it even bigger than what I was just doing on my own. So like I said, we thought the 3 of us together could provide so much more value and benefit together than we were doing separately. So I had created some products at Widow 411. And so I just kind of brought those over to the Widow Squad. And one of them it's called the Ultimate Survival Guide for Widows. And it's basically a soup to nuts of everything you have to do after your spouse dies. So all the complex administrative tasks, I call them the post-death tasks that you have to do. And you understand what I mean there too. It's a lot. So when I was going through that as a new widow, I was just flabbergasted, like so overwhelmed with everything that I had to do that I just kept thinking back at that time, like, what can I do with this? Like, I'm overwhelmed and I knew my finances in our marriage and I knew passwords and I knew where our investments were. I'm like, I knew all those things and I was still overwhelmed trying to get these tasks done. So I was thinking like, how can I help other people? How can I help other widows do something with this? So it took me a couple years to get that into any kind of a, semblance of anything that made sense. But I created this course. It's an online course for widows that takes you through everything from getting organized to dealing with your account management. And I'm not a financial planner or anything like that. I'm not an accountant. I'm not, a CPA or anything like that. I'm a widow who went through these overwhelming, enormous list of tasks and just decided to help other people do that too. So when you're overwhelmed and you don't know where to turn and everything, you don't think you're getting anything done. I can't do this. It's too much. I don't know where my passwords are. I don't know what my bank accounts are. I just have a very, I don't know the word, like list step-by-step instructions of everything that you're supposed to do. Again, not probate or anything like that, but just a lot of overwhelm condensed into, I've been there, I've done that. Let me help you. Let me walk you through it.
That's awesome. So you started this roughly 5 years after your husband passed, right? Were you working on it in that time frame, or did something change in your life that you're like, okay, now is the time for me to start helping?
With the Widow Squad or
with the Widow 411?
With the Widow 411, yes. So it's interesting because I bought the domain for Widow 411, I think the year after my husband died. So I knew I was going to help widows. I just didn't know how.
Oh,
gotcha.
So I just bought the domain thinking, okay, one of these days I'll figure it out. So it's probably 3 years after he died when I started figuring out how to create the website and learn about WordPress and how to do all the technical stuff. That probably took me another year before I was actually really sitting down to write blog posts and providing those other kind of resources. So now when I switched over to the Widow Squad, I created the website at the Widow Squad because I'd had all that experience doing it already once before. So I did it again. It's not easy. It's technical. It's, there's a lot of back end work that you have to do on it. But the first time around, I was like, what am I getting myself into? The second time around, I was like, I can do this. I can do this.
Yeah.
Like all of us do in grief, right? Like we get through it, we learn it, we figure it out, and we keep moving forward. So it was about a year after my husband died when I just started thinking about it. And then I don't know why 3 years later I decided to start. I just did.
I think we were 20 years later. Well, I was 20 years later and CJ was like a year and a half later. And I was like, he was just writing a lot on Facebook. And I was like, yo, we should start a podcast. It was literally like as simple as that. And then we were like, we better like launch because we can't really like get guests if they don't see like what, is kind of like the art of the possible. And sure enough, we had like 2 guests that we confirmed in the beginning, like my dad and a cousin and then a friend of a friend. Yeah. So we had like 4. And then it was just like, we're booked through next year. Like all of a sudden.
Amazing. Well, that's amazing. But the point is it just takes one step forward in that direction. You don't, and that's what I think overwhelms a lot of people, widowed or not, grievers or not, when you try to think to step 10 before you've taken step 1.
Yeah.
So that's, back when I started, I was like, okay, I'm going to learn how to create this website. I'm going to start at this point and then learn this and learn. And that took, at least a year. But like to your point, you guys decided to do it. So you figured out how to do it. And that's pretty much what we do is just figure out how to get things done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now we get messages every day, so we can't stop.
No, you can't stop now.
We literally can't
stop. No, which is great though. But look at what you've done. Look at what you can say that you've done now, and how you're helping people too. So that's amazing.
Yeah, I think I was just going to point out that because it was just kind of back to an earlier point you made, which was around there are some local grief communities grief groups and communities, but that was another driver of why we created this was that like. We had that when my mom died in the community where CJ and I lived, but it didn't exist anymore right now. Like they kind of closed down. So he actually didn't have, and I mean, you can pick up on this CJ, but he didn't have anything. Yeah. So like something like the Widow Squad would actually be really welcomed in communities, especially where they don't have like local in-person things.
Yeah, 100%. There was it was all either, widowed in, more advanced age, but there was really nothing for here. And then by some circumstances, it was like, oh, we had a family friend who was widowed, and then this other friend that was widowed, and we kind of tried to meet up every once in a while, but that, kind of died out really easily or really fast. And I think the interesting observation that I've had, because I was writing about my mental health struggles and my wife's cancer before she died.
Yeah.
So like it was a very natural progression for me to be like, well, I'm going to continue to expose all of this and try to help. And then when Ashley like approached me like, hey, let's do this thing, I was like, oh yeah, let's do that. But like the thing that I have observed with being in the widow community, and even before my wife died, I was trying to find a community knowing that it was coming. It feels like there is a lot of widows, specifically those who lose their partner. So like you and I, Kim, who have these ideas to start these things to help, but then they die very fast.
I would agree.
I think because, right? So it's like people just get very, for whatever reasons, it's like there's two things that I've come across is one, it's a shit ton of work. And when you realize that, it's very easy to just be like, I can't do this anymore. And that's totally valid. And that's okay. I think the other thing, and my thesis here is that this is the more common case. People do this as a way of processing their grief,
100%.
which is great. And it's good to process and help others. But then when they get to a spot where they're like, I think I'm okay now, or okay-ish, because we're never okay, that also can like make it die. And I think that also happens too. So I'm like, I guess what I'm saying is it's awesome that you and these two other women have evolved what you want to do with our community to create this thing, like you said, to become something greater, than what the three of you could do individually. And I just want to say thank you for continuing to do that, because you and I both know it is so much fucking work.
It is ridiculous amounts of work.
To do this podcast, it's so much.
I am so glad that you're saying this, because honestly, it like you don't even know. Like people don't even know.
Right.
Yeah.
Not at all.
It's insane. And when I was doing it by myself, I would just, like ask myself daily, what are you doing and why are you doing this? Because sometimes you're writing in like what seems to be a vacuum.
Yeah.
Yes.
A black hole, whatever. Like I would just put out blog posts every week, and I would write a newsletter to my email list every week. And it's so funny when I go back and look at the first newsletters was like to 20 people. Right. And then it grows up, then I had probably, I don't know, a couple thousand, after a while or whatever, but you just keep going. Yeah. And then, I used it in the beginning as a way to process my grief. No question. I was writing blog posts about things that I was struggling with. So
same.
You work it out as you're helping other people. But I think the key for me anyway, and probably for a lot of us, is the more you're in service to other people, the better you are and the better you feel. And so
that's right.
Yeah, it's almost like that shot of, dopamine or something, where you just feel you need more of that feeling, because it's so nice to get those emails and that feedback. And
it is.
Whatever the people are saying. I've had people email and say, nobody's ever said it that way before. Or, I didn't realize that I could admit that this is how I felt, or whatever the case may be. We just got an email last week from a lady in Israel. Oh, and there's a whole bunch of stuff going on over there right now, right?
Yeah.
And she said, I listened to your podcast. It brings me a sense of, peace and whatever. And the world that we're in, I really appreciate that you're here and doing this. And we were like, are you freaking kidding me right now? Like,
that's amazing.
She's in the middle of a war zone, and she's sending us an email about our podcast. Like, what? So you have to say, like, because there are days, I'm not going to lie, you guys, that I'm like, I'm done.
Yeah,
I'm done.
Me too.
The technology, the keeping up with everything. Algorithms changing, honestly, right? You're like you're shaking your heads like you know exactly what I mean. It is not easy. But we get those emails and we get that feedback, and you're like, okay, I can keep going for a little bit longer, right? We can keep going.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is. It's very rewarding. It is definitely rewarding.
It is those things that I think they do keep us going. I literally quit my day job to do this,
Yeah.
and my other business is full time, so I can be of service to people. Like that is my whole, like my entire vision for my main company now is that no griever will have to go through the journey alone. Like that's it.
Bingo.
You know, and
bingo.
yeah, like that's it. So the interesting thing, like you said, I did the same thing. Like obviously my writing is really me processing, and people have responded well to it. So I'm like, then I will keep writing as I process.
Absolutely. And we're all different, right? We all grieve differently and have different priorities and whatever. And, you know, I think one of the things we try to do with our group too is we're very real and realistic, and there's no end to grief and all that jazz. But also, I mean, like I said, it'll be 10 years for me in February. And I still cry. Obviously, I still break down, and I still have moments, right? And so there's a misconception about that, you know, reaching some plateau where you're just like, okay, grief's over, I'm done, and I'm going to move on. And that's not the way it goes. So I'm in the car and I'm driving. I don't remember where I was going, but it took me, you know, say 30 to 40 minutes to get there. And I just started thinking back to when my husband was sick at the very, very end. We brought him home with hospice, and he was very, very ill at that point. And there's some things I wish I'd done differently. Okay. So anyway, I'm thinking about all of that, and I just start bawling, just start sobbing in my car. And you know how you tell yourself in your brain, well, you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't think that and you shouldn't I was doing all the shoulds. And then I was listening back to the voice of, you know, one of our group meetings where we tell the other widows like, well, no, you can feel however you want to feel, and this doesn't go away, and it's okay. And, you know, you've been through some really hard things. So I started saying to myself in my car, no. You went through a really difficult time. It's okay to feel this trauma, even 10 years later. And so where my voice to myself was not so nice back in the day, it's different now, because I'm obviously helping the other widows through their grief too, but you have to mirror back that to yourself. And so I was in my car just bawling, like I shouldn't be crying this hard. You know, it's been 10 years. And why do I keep thinking about the same thing over and over again? Because it was traumatic.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I experienced a trauma, and that doesn't necessarily go away. But my point is I was kinder to myself in that moment of, no, you really went through some tough stuff. I didn't allow myself to believe that I went through trauma. I didn't allow myself to believe in the first probably 2 or 3 years that I had gone through such a difficult experience. No, I was just powering through. Like,
I'm the same.
Get it done. Like, I got things to do, places to go and whatever. And a friend, I don't remember what we were talking about one day, and she said, well, you know, you've been through this very traumatic experience. It took someone to just say those words to me for me to be
Holy
like,
shit.
You know what? I did.
Damn.
I did. But my brain wasn't absorbing that or allowing me to you know, see it or believe it for a couple of years. So we are that voice to the widows now saying, no, we understand exactly what you're going through, and we know how this works. And I can say, guess what, you guys? I broke down in my car last week. It's going to be 10 years in February, right? So we are humans, and we have feelings. So sometimes when you pass that store, or you see that sign, or that song comes on the radio, and out of nowhere, you just break down. That was my car ride that day. I just broke down. But I thought, well, okay, I guess I needed that. Sometimes I need to, I don't cry enough sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes no, I don't cry enough. I need those forced cries sometimes, but.
So I have a question for you then. Because you've been in this space of trying to help other widows for so long now, what have you learned in how you can protect your own energy, mental health, whatever like attribute you want to say, to be able to continuously go back to that space and then come back to your life and kind of continue on in that? Because it is very difficult to go in and out of that space.
It is. It's emotionally draining sometimes. And there's 3 of us, so in the group. So sometimes we don't always all have to be, you know, in the place, but we talk about it too. And I'm remarried now, and I talk to my husband about it now too. And just acknowledging it, I think, really, because sometimes I do get emotionally drained. There's no question. Grief is really hard to carry. It's really, really hard. And so I know how hard it is for the widows. It's also hard for us sometimes because of the depth of some of it. And,
Yeah.
especially when we get widows who come in whose husband died by suicide.
Oh.
And, I always tell them, like, there's another level to your grief that I can't even begin to know. So we just try to acknowledge that. But, we still can offer what we can offer. But yeah, sometimes it's super, super heavy. So it's just realizing, really, just, acknowledging sometimes I need a moment, I may need to step back, or I need a break, or my partners need a break, or whatever. And we do. But we have a lot of members who also help each other. So it's not like you come in and it's like, we're, instructors and we're talking to you and we're teaching you and you do this. It's like a community.
Yeah.
So we have other people helping each other as well, which is nice.
Yeah. I think it's important to be able to have that. Acknowledging is definitely probably one of the more powerful things we have.
I feel like we've even kind of already encountered that a little bit with like the question of whether we should like do more episodes. Like, right now we're like 2 a month. And I was just kind of like, yeah, it would be great for listenership. And like, maybe we'll be able to get ads quicker, or we don't even want to do ads. That's a bad example, but like the emotional toll, like, is that worth it? Even when I have people listening, it's like, I get listen to like one a week. I mean, sometimes I'll stockpile them for like, when I'm traveling or something like that. But it's like, is 4 episodes a month helpful, or is it hurtful? Like for us, and at this, for the sake of like having, extra listens. And so I feel like that's like one thing that we've already encountered. Like, how do we, what do we do next?
Well, that's a good point though. But this is, you get to decide what is in your emotional wheelhouse, right? Whatever you can do, you do.
Yeah.
And then if it changes, it changes. And so this is where I think we've kind of not put too many restrictions on ourselves. We'll do these things until we can't, or don't want to, or, or need a change. So we get caught up in that more. And I am super, super guilty of this, especially in the group where we all come up with these great ideas. Like, we could do this and this, and then we could have this and this and this. And the next thing you know, we're flipping exhausted emotionally, just from the mental, brain power that it takes. And so then we got to bring ourselves back down a notch and go, okay, maybe that's not feasible right now, but we'll put a pin in it. We'll put a pin in there and come back to it. But maybe we can do that in the future. But we have so many great ideas, which I'm sure you guys have a lot of great ideas, and you want to do them all. And you can't, because again, we're human and we have so many hours in a day, and this topic is highly emotional. So it does take a lot out of you. So it's okay to do two a month.
Yeah.
2 podcasts a month for as long as that takes. Yeah,
that's a good point. What have you noticed you've gotten out of this in your life by serving other widows?
Well, the crazy thing is, I said we just had this month is our anniversary, and we just did a podcast on the Widow Squad podcast about our anniversary, and we were asking each other, what's one thing you've learned, and so my big thing is, I have learned how essential vulnerability is in life, just in life. So again, I was always the type of person who, I just got things done, right? I just, if it needed to be fixed, I fixed it. You need to figure it out, I'll figure it out. There was nothing I couldn't control until my husband died. So when that happened, and I was like, I can't control this situation. This is foreign to me. Like, this does not compute. What am I supposed to do here? So it took me several years to really understand that I'm not supposed to have it all figured out. You're just really not supposed to. That's not a requirement of life to have everything figured out. I did not know that until I was, in my late 40s, early 50s, right? So the vulnerability part, it was like, well, maybe I could try that and see how that works out for me. So being in the space and talking to other widows and having to say, you know what, this happened to me. This is how I dealt with it or didn't deal with it, gives them permission to then, share their vulnerability too. So it's been a learning curve for me, but a really good one, because now I think I'm not as hard on myself as I have been in the past. And I am, open to admitting that things are not always great, because nobody's got it figured out. Nobody's great all the time. So there's a freedom. There's a big, there's a peace and a freedom in just saying, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. And it's okay not to know. It just took me a long, very long time to get to that point.
Simplest lessons are often hard to learn.
They're very hard to learn.
This sounds random, but it's not. Your boys played piano, correct?
Yes.
Your husband was teaching them.
Yes. Right? Well, he didn't teach them. He wanted them to play. He did not know how to play. Yeah.
Right. He brought them to the lessons.
He took them to lessons.
The reason why I brought that up is you're talking about like what you learned. So I was thinking about the selfish aspect of like, what am I getting out of doing these podcasts? And there's a lot of them, but it's actually been a massive learning experience for me as well, especially because I'm still like kind of going through this, right? Like this is year 3, and the episode we recorded with you, there was one statement that you made about your son, and I'm not sure which one, who said like, how long do I have to play piano for my dead dad?
Yeah.
I left that episode, that recording. I left the night we recorded. I went upstairs and I told my kids if they don't want to play violin anymore, they don't need to, because I was only doing it because my wife started it with them. And I was like, well, an instrument's good for them. And then I kept justifying it. But I knew that they hated it. Yeah. And I never seriously considered that like, oh, there's a lot of ties to this as well.
Absolutely.
with my wife. So I wanted to share that with you, that like it actually had a tangible impact on my family.
Well, I'm going to tell my son too. I'm going to tell my son. That was my older son who's the one who had to stop me in my tracks a lot of the time by saying those profound things. And you're like, oh crap. Yeah. I guess you're right. But we get on that thought train of I have to, I must, it's required. I need, and especially feeling like you're letting down your dead spouse, right? Like I can't hack it. I can't get him to piano. So I must be doing something wrong, which is ridiculous. And the same thing with the violin. But is music good for the kids' brains? Absolutely. Do they learn valuable life lessons from it? Yes. But not every kid's parent died who's in violin class or piano class.
Yeah, exactly.
There's only so much you can do.
Yeah, I agree. So the other thoughts that I've been having is, as you do these things and have been doing them, is there any elements of it that you're trying to honor your husband, or like he's obviously a big part of the story and likely comes up all the time and examples of things, et cetera, et cetera. Do you feel some sort of pressure to honor him through it? Has there been a struggle with that?
That's a really good question. So that goes back to what the job that I was doing when he died, because I took over running his business. So to answer your question, no, I don't feel that way in the widow squad or in my widow work, because I've already done that over here on this side when I took over running his business. So I did that for 8 years because I was afraid of letting it go and losing his legacy and all the things that, go with it. So no, I don't have that feeling over here. Obviously we talk about him all the time and he, comes up in stories and everything too, but this is mine. This is me. It's a result of what happened to him, obviously, but it's all mine and my doing. When I was running his business, that was his. I did it for, the reasons that I did for 8 years, but then I decided that wasn't my dream or my ability, quite frankly. So now I can do what I know I can do better. And so, he's still part of the story, but not in any way that I feel required.
Yeah, that resonates with me. Like this, like my wife is definitely obviously my late wife is a big part of it, but I definitely feel it being something very personal to me and those left behind. Like this is for others who were in my situation or are in my situation.
Right. Because we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the death, right? There's no question about that. But everything you've done. Everything I've done, and Ashley, same thing. I've done it because I wanted to, because it brought me peace or whatever, It was just what I wanted to do. And I have more, and I love to write too. And there's way more I have to say about this, in books and whatever else is going to come out in the future. But that's what I keep thinking about too, is I have so much I want to say. I have so much to say. So I can't just, in my mind, I can't just walk away. I got too much to say.
Do you think, just kind of going back to that point about your friend kind of being like, you went through a trauma, do you think that kind of catapulted you into starting, like officially starting when you Widow 411 when you originally started? I think I'll explain my view.
Yeah, it was after. So what I have explained to people before in the past too, when I am stressed out or things are really, really difficult for me, I'm not the kind of person that just goes and sits in a corner. I take on more work.
Same.
Okay. I keep piling on the work. So when I was first widowed and, a year or 2, 3, even after my husband died, I still wasn't processing my feelings or my grief. So I just kept putting more work on myself. Well, that, learning how to create a website and doing all the tech and learning WordPress and all that stuff was just one of the ways of doing that. So yeah, I don't think that was the catalyst for me because I started it while I was still not quite processing anything, but that's my norm. That's how I operate. The more stress I get, the more work I add on to my plate. Doesn't really make sense, but that's what I do.
No,
you're like that too, right, Ashley?
Literally the same.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense, but yeah.
But at the same time, I don't know if it was like this realization that like, okay, yeah, like something, traumatic, I suppose traumatic did happen, was probably not even until we started this podcast. And I had to go to a rheumatologist today because I have like, it's just like weird things with like my hands and my feet. Like, it's just like, it's honestly, it feels normal to me because it's been going on that long. And they're like, yeah, that's not supposed to be like that. And I was just like, that is literally like how I feel like my like life has been. Like, I was just like, thought it was supposed to be that way because like, oh, well, she died when I was 9. That's like what life's like. Sometimes it happens to us. Sucks.
Yeah.
But
right. So but if somebody says to you that's not the way it's supposed to be, and someone says to me, you went through a trauma and whatever someone says to you, and then you're like, oh.
Yeah.
Like the words have to come out when you're like, huh, I never thought of it that way. So you need those people, which you guys are to your listeners from your podcast and which we are to our community. Yeah. That voice of no, that's not the way it's supposed to be, or you don't have to cover this up or, feel a certain way. I've told a story a million times and even wrote a blog post about it too, about a friend of mine who, when I was doing my husband's business, it was a chemical sales business, which I didn't really care about. And I don't care about chemicals, but I did it anyway. And so there was some selling involved and I hated sales, hate sales. I am not a sales person. And people can tell me whatever they want to. You could do it if you wanted to. I don't want to. I know I could do it. I just don't want to. So I didn't like the sales part. And so I was so overwhelmed and distraught about having to go into a new place and just like say who I am and what we sold and rust preventative oil and this and this. And so I had lunch with a friend and she was really good at sales. She was like, she won like awards and top salesperson in her company and everything. And I'm just complaining about how I hate it so much. And she's like, Kim, there's really no big secret to sales. Half the battle is just showing up. Okay. So this was years ago, you guys. I've written blog posts on this. I've done things in the Widow Squad about this topic and on our podcast. Half the battle is just showing up. So somebody says something so simple, which has to do with life, has to do with grief, has to do with it. Just show up. And then things fall into place as you show up. You don't know how it's going to fall into place. You don't know what the future is going to bring. But when you keep showing up, things, start to show up for you. So that was just this really interesting conversation. Like, she didn't know. I don't even talk to this friend anymore. If she ever hears any of my, any of this or reads any of my blog, she'd be like, I never knew that meant so much to her. A simple thing she said in lunch one day was like, I have taken that with me and thought about it ever since. So when things get really bad, I just keep telling myself, just show up. Yeah. Just show up. It'll be okay.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That is the definition that I've heard of what resilience is, because I was going on some long tirade about how resilience is bullshit and blah, 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 blah. It might have even been in therapy. I don't know. And I was just super fucking pissed off about it. And I'm pretty sure I was in therapy, and she was just like, resilience is just showing up. I was like, wait, what? Oh, okay. I can get behind that. Like, that makes more sense to me than like this like weird ideal that like resilience is some really challenging thing that like only a few people have. And she's like, no, just show up every day and whatever that looks like. And that's resilience.
Whatever
and
it looks like. And then things happen because the universe is like, okay, you came here today. I'm going to show you this. You came here today. I'm going to give you that. So, but it's, if you sit home under your covers, or you never come back out again. But those are the thoughts that we have in our head. Those are the things we tell ourselves. I can't. It's too hard. I'll never be whatever. Always and never. We talk about that a lot in the Widow Squad. We don't like those words, always and never. It's not true. It's just not true. So, but we tell ourselves those stories in our head over and over again, especially early in grief, because it's how can you wrap your head around things ever being okay again?
Yeah.
So I know we're getting close on time. So I'm really, really curious to hear your thoughts on this because one, everything you went through with your husband and then taking over the business and then starting Widows 401 and then starting the Widow Squad is the idea of being on the other side of grief in quotations, or just at a place where it's not completely crushing you anymore. When you got to that place, presuming you are, and you were in service to other widows, was there any thought of how do I present what I'm trying to do in my life, as an example, in a way that is still genuine to the reality of how fucking hard it is? Because for me, like when either like the early stages of being a widow, or when my wife was diagnosed, or just my mental health alone and struggling with depression, anxiety, and everything else, I was so repulsed and so like with just infuriated with this whole like toxic positivity or this everything will be fine, or just smile more, or go work out, or do a cold plunge, or this or that, or like, your wife's going to be fine because X, Y, and Z. Like I fucking hate it. And I'm always more towards, like just focusing on the harshness of things, just because I like being in that space because it doesn't get talked about enough. So I'm curious how you've approached it, because this is like where I'm at right now, where life is very different and I'm acting in different ways than I have in the past, even, before my wife died. How do you still show up in a genuine way without it coming across as just like, hey, I'm over here and like everything's amazing and great and you're over there, so just keep plugging along and you'll be fine?
Well, that's a good question too, though, because I'm with you on the toxic positivity. I mean, I wrote a blog post several years ago, but it was, everything was like gratitude list this and gratitude list that and whatever. And I wrote an anti-gratitude list and I called it "This Sucks Ass." That was my anti-gratitude list. Okay. Like I'm not going to do your gratitude bullshit. I'm pissed. And I'm going to stay pissed for a while. So it was just, I don't like that. I don't like being told that I have to just, buck up and it's going to be okay. So what's interesting about the dynamic of us in the Widow Squad is we have those different personalities. So I'm kind of the more, I'm going to tell it to you straight kind of girl, where then we have like, the other one who's very calm and very nurturing. And then one who's like, rah, sis boom bad cheerleader, right? So the positive, everything's going to be okay all the time.
Yes.
So we, sometimes when we're in our groups and I don't want to sound like there's too much positivity, but I think you can understand what I'm saying. When it's getting to the point where it's like, we don't say you should, but think about it this way or whatever. I will come in and be like, yeah, but it sucks ass. Right. So you have to come back in and be like, I know. Yeah. I'm over here now. I am in a different place for sure. I don't remember exactly as viscerally how painful that grief was back in, 10 years ago. But I still know what it was like to not know what to do or how to do it and have people telling me, just do this.
Yeah.
Just do that. At least you, blah, blah, blah. So I remember that and that bothers me and I don't like it. So I try to be more of the realist. Like, no, it's okay to be pissed. Drop some F-bombs. Like, the F word is my favorite word in the world. And my kids they're adults now. They're 18 and 20. They're adults now, but I don't swear in front of them and I don't want them to swear in front of me. That's just how I operate. Yeah. But they would say like, have you ever, sworn in your, I'm like, dude, Like if you could hear me on a normal day, you would not even know that this was your mom. So I love it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm going to drop an F-bomb. I don't care. I'm going to say words, bad words, whatever. So I think I just try to be that, not that the other girls aren't realistic. I don't want to,
Yeah.
That's all right.
paint that picture. You know what I mean? But it's just really like, no, this sucks. And it's okay that it sucks. So I am not going to be the person who's positive all the time.
I think that's part of the beauty of like your partnership though, is that, some people need the calm person, the slight positivity.
Absolutely.
Like sometimes
they need the nurturer.
Right.
I am not a nurturer.
Yeah.
I mean, I am, but not, I don't know, sometimes maybe a little bit.
Yeah. I'm definitely
not as
every
much.
once
I'm
in a while.
definitely
Every
more
once
of
in a while.
the F-bombs and like, well, just, you can say it sucks and we'll get through it. Like you don't have to put the positive spin on it. But I also like notice more and more now if someone is like, well, at least blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, we don't need to like make someone else's worse situation like make me feel better or make me feel worse. Like I can feel like shit.
You can and you should.
Right.
That's the whole point. That's life.
Just feel it.
You are going to feel that way. It is what it is.
Yeah, and we don't need to grief comparison or tragedy comparison
it's the
drives
worst.
me up the wall. So it's like it doesn't serve anybody. So if somebody's to me like, oh, I'm sorry, I don't mean to complain. I know like, oh, you've had it so much worse. And I'm like, one, there should be no comparison because how you feel is how you feel and you could feel the same. It's just a different circumstances. Also, like that doesn't make me feel great either. So like I understand you're trying to like calm the situation, but like let's just stop the comparisons and let's just say if you're going through something shitty, you're going through something shitty.
And you
like,
can tell us about it. We do want to hear about it.
Right.
We do want to hear about other people's shitty days.
Yeah.
Because believe it or not, we are going through or have gone through so much grief. It's kind of important that we hear other people's crappy stuff.
Yeah.
So that, we know that other people have maybe not as much or as deep, but they still have issues that they're dealing with. That gets us out of our own heads once in a while.
Yeah.
100%. And the thing about swearing is it's actually processed in a different part of your brain than your normal language processing area. And it physically alleviates pain.
I believe it.
Which is why we're like so quick to, when you stub your toe, be like, oh, son of a bitch, because it actually physically relieves pain.
I think it makes me feel better, no doubt. There's no doubt.
It does. Yeah, it's scientific. Like they've actually studied it.
Yeah.
So like people who've had damage to their brains too, where they've like lost their ability in language, they still remember swear words and stuff like that.
Oh my gosh, that's fascinating. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is fascinating.
Okay, so, well, this was a different episode, so I can't necessarily ask this, but I will ask a version of it is not what advice would you give to somebody who's gone through losing a spouse, but what advice would you give to somebody who has gone through that and wants to help their community in whatever grief they've gone through or tragedy or...
That's a great question. Just take that first step. Don't try to figure out how to do it all in the beginning because you won't. And nobody's ever ready to do what they think they want to do. And I was guilty of that for a long time too. Well, I'm not ready. I'll be ready when this happens or that happens, right? I learn this or I do that. We're never ready. So just take that first step because you don't even know when you make that decision where that next decision leads you because you haven't made the first one yet. So you got to make that first decision to even open those doors. And I'm surprised, not surprised, I guess I am surprised, whatever word, of the opportunities that have come to me from just taking those steps and just moving toward that path. It's like, I wouldn't have guessed that this many years later, I'd be doing what I'm doing now. I would have never guessed that would have happened, but you just keep taking the steps, making the decisions and doing the thing and then pivot when it doesn't work for you anymore. Yeah. So, that's it. If you want to try to do something, and it doesn't have to be something big and massive. You could do something in your community where you go visit somebody who's maybe, elderly and widowed or a widower or something, or, find some assisted living places around your community, whatever. It doesn't have to, you don't have to start a website. You don't have to start a podcast. Right. It's that comparison thing too, where you're like, well, exactly. I have to do something big, really big. No, you can do whatever brings you joy and peace and, fills your soul. It doesn't have to be a podcast or a website. So that would be what I would say, is just make those first decisions and see where it leads you.
And then one last thing for any of our listeners, and we'll also put this in the show notes, but where should they go if they're interested in joining the Widow Squad community?
So it's just widowsquad.com. That's where our website is.
Awesome.
We've got all of our information about us and who we are. And we do have a podcast. And so we transcribe all those podcasts. So you can either listen to it audio. You can find that link on our website too, or you can read the blog posts, which are transcripts of our podcast. So lots of resources.
Awesome.
And we keep adding the resources, and we keep adding to it too, because we do want to be kind of that, that destination resource for widows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Amazing.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing with our audience, and definitely recommend them to go check that out and help support everything that you guys are doing.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Day After. You can find this podcast and more at our website at www.thedayafter.com. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd really appreciate it if you take a moment to leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcast.